When I was 8 years old, my parents brought me to a neurologist, where I received my first diagnosis of a disabling condition. Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition classified by motor tics and is generally misunderstood by neurologists, doctors, and members of the general public. I like to describe it as if ADHD and OCD had a baby. It's the best way to describe something that no one really has words for, and even today we still don't understand. When I was 10, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. When I was 11, I started developing chronic pain that progressed as I went through puberty and has stuck with me for over a decade. I went through numerous treatments. I spent years in therapy. Diagnoses came and went. I spent 2 years in residential treatment. And I bounced around doctors' offices, being passed around hospital departments like a hot potato. I'm not telling you this information to get your pity. That's the furthest thing from what I want. But I do want to challenge the prejudices you might have had seeing me come on stage today. You might have noticed I have no physical maladies or obvious physical maladies. You might have seen that I don't walk with a cane or crutches. I don't use a wheelchair, and hopefully my speech is clear and you can understand what I'm saying. You made an assumption when you saw me, and that assumption was ableist. Okay, there we go. I want to make something perfectly clear. This is a list of my diagnoses. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I exist as I am. And I'm different, and that's okay. And I'm disabled, and I own that. But I want to tell you this in order to challenge your prejudices. You saw me, and you made an assumption. And maybe that assumption was that I was horribly disabled, or maybe the assumption was that I was perfectly normal. Either way, you made an assumption. And I want you to sit in the discomfort of being called out on your assumption. I want you to sit in that I want you to sit in that, and I want you to feel discomfort. Okay. The university system as a whole is ableist. We are all ableist, whether or not we acknowledge it. If you're able-bodied and you see me, chances are you're going to assume that I fit into the able-bodied normal that we have outlined. But that's not always true. People are different, and they exist differently. We need to acknowledge that and celebrate it. Ableism is defined by Andrew Perling, a writer for Forbes, as any statement or behavior directed at a disabled person that denigrates or assumes a lesser status for that person because of their disability. Or social habits, practices, regulations, laws, and institutions that operate under the assumption that disabled people are inherently less capable overall, less valuable in society, and or should have less personal autonomy than is ordinarily granted to persons of the same age. Disability exists. And I also want to practice something with you. I've told you all my disabilities. I've told you all that you're ableist. And maybe some of you were insulted or upset, and maybe some of you were uncomfortable, and maybe some of you have more questions. You want to know what CPTSD is as opposed to regular PTSD. And I'm here to tell you, it's none of your business. I'm setting a boundary because we as disabled people are constantly having our boundaries ignored. Let's go back to that definition. Autonomy. Disabled people are entitled to some autonomy. Just because we decide to go to the same grocery store as you doesn't mean you're entitled to ask me why I walk with a limp. And some days I don't, and most days I'm lucky and I don't. But some people do all the time. Some people are missing limbs, and you get a well-meaning stranger reaching out on social media trying to sell you essential oils, saying, hey, this will solve all your problems, and it's none of your business that I'm like this. I'm happy like this. I'm okay like this. The university system as a whole relies on what is called the medical model of disability. It defines disability as something that is intrinsic to to the individual that impacts them physically and degrades their quality of life. This can look like a lot of different things. And it perpetuates a system of ableism in the university. This system can look like long and arduous accommodation processes, mandatory attendance, requiring a doctor's note, complex academic language when it's completely unnecessary, not providing accommodation, placing disability on a hierarchy, and separating disabled students from the rest of the student body. However, disabled people have long since been asking and advocating for us to change from a medical model of disability to a social model of disability. This model says that disabled people aren't disabled by their impairment or their difference. They're disabled by societal barriers that impact and prevent us from being successful in our lives. We as disabled people exist, and we should not have to work hard and jump through hoops to be successful in university. Disabled people are not less whole. They are not less than you. A disabled person walking on stage is not useless, and they are not unable to participate. They're tenacious, intelligent individuals. They're of value in the classroom, and the university system makes it difficult for them to be successful. The solution to this is really simple. You have to challenge your own prejudices. You have to go forward. You have to open your eyes and your ears, and you have to listen when people tell you that they need help. Open communication is really the solution. Being able to sit in a classroom and lecture in front of hundreds of people and say, I know everyone has their own needs and everyone has their own different ability level. If I need to make a class more accessible in some way, tell me. That opens a doorway. It allows a student to come up to a professor and say, this is what I need to be successful. This doesn't happen in a lot of universities because that communication isn't there. People aren't able to communicate they need help because there's no one to tell them. In a lot of ways, it's like screaming into a void. You have to wait and listen and open your eyes and open your ears and see that we, as disabled people, exist, and we're here, and we want to be successful. We don't want your pity. We want your help in carving out our spaces in the world as a whole and in the world of academia. Thank you.